Hi, my name is Holly Payne, and today I'm going to be talking to you about volunteers. We use volunteers in a number of different ways at Covenant House Alaska. So at the end of this presentation, you're going to be able to understand the role of volunteers, the role of the volunteer specialists, how you're going to be working with volunteers, and have a basic understanding of the volunteer process. Volunteers are a very important part of the culture here at Covenant House Alaska. They help to grow and strengthen our team, really expand the amount of opportunities that we're able to provide to youth. With the staff that we have on hand, there's no way that we would be able to provide as many different groups and activities as we can with volunteers. They also assist in just the day-to-day operations of our facility. And potentially these volunteers become donors and advocates. More often when people are really here doing the work, they see the need and want to give. And so it's really important for us to recognize that these volunteers can really have an impact on how people view Covenant House outside in the community. So what are volunteers? I think there are things that volunteers are and are not meant to be. Volunteers should be support, they should be helpful, they should be a positive part of our team. They are friends of Covenant House, they are a voice of Covenant House in the community, and they should be reliable. Volunteers should not be negative aspect of Covenant House. They should not be more work than they're worth, meaning that if we're having to really go around and correct a volunteer many, many times or really put too much effort into that beyond the initial training, that's not what they're meant to be here. Volunteers are not staff nor case managers. They're not taking on duties that our staff are meant to be doing. They're meant to support our staff. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And volunteers are not, quote unquote, untouchable. If there is a problem with a volunteer, those things need to be addressed. It's not something that you shouldn't feel comfortable sharing with your supervisor or the volunteer specialist to address those situations. How do we use volunteers? Volunteers are really embedded in all of the programs here at Covenant House Alaska, just about anything you can think of. They're doing everything behind the scenes, such as donations processing and the clothing room, helping out in the kitchen, administrative type tasks, janitorial tasks, helping with special events or holiday prep, as well as working directly with our youth. They are providing group opportunities around art, music, recreation, employability, or life skills. And then we have our mentor role, which is another unique role that we'll dive a little deeper into later. Roles are always changing based on the need of our youth and our staff, as well as the passions and the talents that the volunteers have. We really try to match them with something that they're really wanting to be a part of. So if you see a volunteer need as you come on board, talk to your supervisor and we can recruit to make that happen. I want to give you a basic understanding today of the volunteer process. As a licensed child care facility and a part of Covenant House International, we have various requirements for our volunteers to process through, not unlike our staff. Volunteers start by filling out a volunteer form. Most often now that is online on our website, but I also have paper copies at the front desk. As I receive those forms, we determine if a volunteer is looking to do something more long-term, weekly, or mentoring, or looking at something more as needed or intermittent. So if they're looking at something more as needed or intermittent, we start with a soft background check, making sure that there are no red flags and these volunteers are safe to work with our youth. At that point, we do keep an email list of volunteers and reach out as different needs arise. And these volunteers are supervised by staff. They wear a red lanyard, which represents that staff need to supervise. If volunteers are looking to come in weekly or mentor something on an ongoing, more long-term basis, we have a full application for those volunteers or mentors. So they do complete that extra application, and then we start with an interview. We really want to make sure that these volunteers are appropriate and safe to be working with our youth. If the interview goes well, then we continue through the background check and reference checks. Those are the same thing that our staff are going through. At that point, volunteers also attend our orientation and training. It may require that they have a specific license or certification depending on their role. And then they start out being trained by staff and wearing that same red lanyard, symbolizing that they need to be supervised by staff. As those volunteers are trained up, more comfortable, both on their end and on our end, then they're able to be more independent, and they are given that green lanyard, kind of the go sign that they can work independently. Throughout the year, we invite volunteers to ongoing trainings, and we also do annual evaluations of our volunteers. So it's really important that we maintain all of these processes and that all of our staff are kind of on board and understand these steps as well. And just a note too, volunteers on site here need to be at least 21 years old. And a lot of that is for the confidentiality of our youth. We don't want high school students here going to school with our youth, things like that. To dive in a little bit deeper here on the red and green lanyards. A red lanyard symbolizes that these volunteers need to be supervised by staff when they're volunteering with youth. Why do they need to be supervised? They may be a new volunteer and they still have to complete their training, or they may be just a one-time or intermittent volunteer who has not gone through our full process. This is a requirement by both our licensing and corporate child protection policies. The green volunteer lanyard really lets staff know that these volunteers have been completely vetted and they can work independently with youth, with staff just checking in intermittently. So these volunteers go through the full application, background check, and orientation process and have enough experience that they feel comfortable, and again, that we feel comfortable with them working independently with youth. At this point, I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into what it means to be a traditional weekly volunteer versus the unique role of a mentor. So our weekly volunteers, as I mentioned, must be at least 21 years old. They're placed throughout all of our programs. They cannot drive youth or any of our agency vehicles anywhere. These volunteers must have staff present for any off-site activities, and they cannot share any of their personal contact information or social media with our youth. Mentors have a very special role. Our mentors must be at least 28 years old. They are working with youth in our 2 transitional living programs, Rites of Passage and Passage House. This is a unique role where they complete an extra portion of orientation. They work one-on-one with a specific youth. They do have the ability to drive youth in their own personal vehicles. However, they cannot drive youth in agency vehicles. Mentors may work with youth off-site independently and can communicate through their personal cell phone or email. They still cannot share social media with youth. What is the role of the volunteer specialist? They're here to take volunteers through the process from beginning to end. So this includes recruitment, marketing, posting opportunities, really making the community aware of all the opportunities that we have here. Taking them through the application, onboarding, and scheduling of those volunteers, orienting new volunteers to the facility and the staff that they'll be working with. We'll also maintain a volunteer file, including any paperwork or training requirements that we have. You'll also see volunteer groups that come through from time to time, a lot of businesses or clubs, organizations that want to work together. So we'll work with those volunteers as they come in. And then, of course, supporting our staff that are working with all of these volunteers. What do we need from you? We really need you to treat our volunteers as you would any member of our team or community. Help them to feel welcome. As new volunteers come into our facility, it's great to remind them about confidentiality, not taking any photos or video, not sharing any personal contact information or social media. Any concerns that they have should be addressed with staff. Also the restroom and emergency procedures. So don't be a stranger, introduce yourself to our volunteers. Help them to feel welcome. You can share any feedback that you have or direction directly with the volunteers at that moment. And if it's something that further needs to be addressed, please notify the volunteer specialist. We also show a lot of appreciation to our volunteers. We want to celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, and just general thank yous. If you notice a volunteer going above and beyond, let us know. We'd like to show that appreciation. Communicate regularly. So again, if there are any volunteer concerns, please address that immediately with a volunteer specialist. We really want to address anything up front as opposed to letting those volunteer issues grow. And then finally, just remember that we do value choice and recognize that, our youth have experienced trauma. And so as a part of different groups and activities, we really want to make sure that youth have a choice to participate or not. And that sometimes means that participation level is low. We do let volunteers know that this is a possibility, but it's good to have our staff reiterating that we really value their time and support of our mission. If you know of people that are interested in volunteering, you can direct them to our website for the online form. If you get a phone call at the front desk, you can transfer them directly to the volunteer specialist. Or if someone comes into the front desk, there are paper copies of the form at the front desk in the volunteer specialist box. Internships or practicum opportunities can be directed to human resources. We will have youth under 21 who want to volunteer. In that case, we try to provide other opportunities for them to still support Covenant House. This may include things such as a donation drive, fundraiser, or service project that they can do off-site. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation. We're really excited to have you as a part of our team at Covenant House Alaska and working with our volunteers. As you get started, you may have some ideas about different ways that we can use volunteers or have friends that you think would be really great to bring into Covenant House. Definitely reach out to your supervisor and/or the volunteer specialists, and we'll continue through this process.